Psst, psst, psst. Hey you, hey you, hey you, it's time. It's time for DFS. That's right. It is Friday night. It's Friday night. We're here to talk some DFS, and I am joined by the one and only Jason Allwine. What's going on, Jason? How you doing, man? What you got going on?
No, I'm doing well, man. Happy to be here. Happy to talk some DFS. Happy to be on yet another show with you. We've been doing it for a minute, going back to even Instagram live streams, just chopping it up. So I'm excited to be here, man.
It's a good time. It's a good time. We're actually going to have a game, and then I'm going to announce here in a second. But welcome on into the Big Tilt. I am your host, Chase Vernon. I am here every single Friday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time on our YouTube channel. Over there, go check it out for PlayerProfiler, Roto Wonderworld. We are here to kick some ass, make y'all some money. And tonight, with special guest Jason Allwine, we have a little game that we're going to play. Every time, if you're watching live, I do not encourage you to do this on a Saturday morning, right? But if you're watching live, every time that Jason says fantastic, we're going to go ahead and take a chug of our adult beverage or our cocktail. So that's the game that we're going to play tonight with Jason on the show. I hope you guys are very excited for that. We're probably going to get tanked. So let's go ahead and do this, Jason. You ready to rock and roll?
You didn't tell me this was a drinking show.
Oh, it's always a drinking show. You got 7-second mini bumper if you can go get your drink and make it back in time. All right, let's go ahead and kick this show off. Oh, man, Jason, I'm excited. We have another week of DFS. Week 5 is upon us. Last week, we had some excellent takes. You know, we wanted to play as much Devin Achan as possible, right? We were out there just pounding our fists on the table. We ended up nailing that. There was a plethora of other picks that we ended up getting right. I actually ended up hitting big on my CJ Stroud picks, Josh Allen ones as well. So I was very excited for that. This week, we have a very interesting setup, which is kind of like our theme of the week now. We have themes of the week that are happening every week. And, you know, we had where you had to pay up for running backs, you had to pay down, you know, for running backs at one point. You got to do a little bit of a mix last week, of course. This week, though, is that there are more high-scoring games on this slate than any time we've seen throughout the season. We've had a couple of high-scoring games on the slate each week. This week, we have at least 3 of them. There could be a fourth or a fifth. And honestly, like, it's making me a little bit nervous. That's like which direction I can go in, but that also makes me very excited. Like, I'm anxious, right? I'm ready to go play a bunch of different lineups. However, unless you're playing 150, it makes it difficult, right? Because you don't want to run out. You don't want to play like, you know, 10 different lineups, one quarterback, right, in each lineup, and they're all completely different. Typically, you want to really invest in the guys that you believe are going to do well. If you end up missing, you end up missing big, right? But if you end up hitting, there's a lot bigger chance that you can win that big time money. And I know it's great throwing in $3 and getting back 10, but if you're doing that for the tournament type plays, you're going to end up losing money in the long run, right? That's where you play the cash games. That's where you get excited for the cash ones where you can kind of play around. What we want to do this week is try and figure out which games we want to try and invest in, because there could be a handful of high scoring ones. I mean, the Bills and the Jags aren't included in this slate, by the way, but they're, you know, in the England games or the European game. Then you have the Rams and the Eagles, the Dolphins and Giants, right? They're in the early games. In the late set of games, you have the Vikings and Chiefs. You know, this could potentially play spoiler to a lot of high-end type stacks that we've seen in the past, where you're seeing Kirk Cousins, you know, Justin Jefferson, right? You're seeing Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce type stacks where you're having to pay up significantly for that. This week could end up leading to a lot of mid-range type plays. I mean, even when we see like the Bengals and the Cardinals, I'm over here looking at the Bengals and Cardinals, and like, if Joe Burrow is up to 100%, the Cardinals play like they have been playing, and their defense is lining up the same way that it was, which, by the way, if you guys don't watch First Mover Pod or listen to the First Mover Pod, check it out over there on YouTube for Player Profiler, you should, because Mark Garcia does an excellent job of breaking down why you should look into certain types of games, right? And the Cardinals, the way that they've kind of thrown teams off is typically the average safety that ends up putting too high. They play him about 20 yards deep. Well, Cardinals play him about 12 to 14 yards deep. And he goes through the whole entire breakdown of that. Y'all really need to go check out First Mover if you have an opportunity to. But the Bengals could thrive off this, right? Especially if T. Higgins ends up playing. He's a deeper target. He's, a 15-yard average depth of target. Jamar Chase can get behind that defense. I mean, the Cardinals could really get burnt, and this could end up turning into a game that's, honestly, one of the higher scoring games on the slate,
Mhm.
as we've seen the Cardinals do in a few games thus far in the season.
Yep.
Meanwhile, just as we predicted, we're starting to see a lot of different players hit that 9K threshold, that 85K threshold that makes it difficult to play. Those are the players that we've been wanting to play the whole season up until week 5, where they start to hit that point, right?
Yeah.
Finally, we saw the first week, or we see the first week of Anthony Richardson hit 7K. I've been talking about that since week 1, how you play him until he hits 7K. And even at 7K, he could still play him. It just depends on the matchup. So we're starting to see those prices take form, right? Where there's not going to be as many, steals. There's not going to be as many surprises outside of, injuries. Now, with that being said, Jason, we got some chalky plays this week, right? Because of the prices going up there. So when you start to see guys that play like a Justin Jefferson or like a Jamar Chase, like Jamar Chase is a great example, because you're going to see a lot of Jamar Chase stacked with Marquise Brown, because Marquise Brown's price tag is only at 5K. So you can go get Jamar Chase 79. You're going to see a lot of Jamar Chase with Marquise Brown. And then you can even go with the Dobbs side of things, right? Because the Bengals aren't great at containing the run. So, I mean, I'm assuming that anytime that you see a Dobbs and Marquise Brown lineup, you're going to see Jamar Chase coming back on the other side. So anytime that you see that type of stuff, you got to get different. Wandale Robinson, right, is another guy. Tyler Boyd is another guy that you could end up seeing a lot of chalk with that matchup. So I think that it's limited as to where you can go for this week, because it is starting to max out the pricing, but I'm excited. I'm excited to jump into this one. Jason, have you noticed any kind of trends that have been happening thus far on the season with DFS?
I mean, not really. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head with Anthony Richardson when you just talked about his price point going up. I mean, that's kind of why the early part of the season is when you can really make that money, really capitalize on the underpriced players. We're starting to see it level out, but as we'll talk about in this show, there's still some values out there, still some players to target, and I like this week's just slate in general. I think that there's a lot of good plays.
Yeah, we do have three teams on bye. It's kind of mixed, or I'm sorry, 4 teams on bye. It's interesting because we can start to take advantage of the price points, right? This is when the smart DFS players start to make money, and everybody that made money in the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks have taken some of these cheap, easy access plays, and then they just throw shit, on a wall to see if it sticks. This is when these bozos start to lose money. So it's fun watching that adjustment. It's fun getting behind it, and I cannot wait to break down this one. So let's go ahead and let's kick this episode off with our first section. We end up talking about 3 different sections, by the way. If you have not listened to the show before, we break down in the first part some studs that we want to see in a lot of our lineups, the majority of our lineups, right? We're going to talk about stacks. We're going to talk about guys that we're just absolutely enamored with, that we want to build our rosters around. And then we're going to build a lineup. We're going to go on to DraftKings. We're going to build ourselves a lineup. Then we're going to talk about some guys that we absolutely don't want anywhere close to our lineups. We're going to build another lineup after that. And then we're going to really dive into a few different sleepers that can help your lineups work and really make you money. So, and then we build a lineup after that too. I just like building lineups. I just wish I could do a show of me building 150 lineups and just talk.
Sounds like a big tilt pre-recorded overtime episode right there.
Oh my God. It would be like a 6-hour long show. I don't want to do that to anybody. That'd be terrible.
You have to make that one a drinking game too.
Oh God. Yeah, you haven't said fantastic yet. I'm very surprised. All right, Jason. So let's go ahead and let's talk about your first guy that you're in love with, or your first stack that you're in love with. Some guys that you might want to build some of your lineups around.
Yeah, and this one might be a little sneaky. I'm still going to Anthony Richardson, even at that 7K price point, just based on how he's playing and the upside he has. I'm always going to go to him. He's the 5th most expensive quarterback right now. He has the argument to be the most expensive, and so I'll probably be going back to him honestly rest of the season. But this week too, I just like divisional matchups. Those games stay close, they stay competitive, and for that reason, I think Derrick Henry could also be a fun person to build around in my eyes. He's averaging 91 yards and half a touchdown every single time he plays the Colts. And for 6 of the last 7 games, he's had over 100 yards. One of these even had 178 and 3 touchdowns. So these divisional games, I think it could be a good way to target it. And I think that's a fun little Anthony Richardson, Derrick Henry stack there.
Yeah, I mean, the Titans really haven't played against too many mobile quarterbacks. I mean, sure, they played against Sean Watson. He only attempted 4 rushing or 4 rushes, right? He played against Justin Herbert, only 1 rushing attempt. So, I don't really consider those, they're mobile quarterbacks, of course, but I don't think they're as run centric as some of these other teams can end up being. But this is a pass funnel defense. I mean, they don't allow teams to run the ball against them, from the running back position. However, they do allow teams to pass against them. We're seeing 2 games of over 300 yards, another game of 289. So you're talking about that 3-point bonus that you get in DraftKings if you end up crossing that 300-yard threshold. I think that Anthony Richardson can get there, and I think that he can get there, with Michael Pittman. I think that he can get there with Joshua Downs to an extent. I think that there is an opportunity, so I don't hate that. Big shout out to everybody in the chat, by the way. Thank you all for tuning into this episode. Make sure y'all head over to youtube.com/PlayerProfiler to make sure that you guys check out our YouTube channel. Now, Jason, I love that take. I think that we can absolutely build around that take. I want to bring a lineup up, but before we do, I need to know, man, like I love paying up for running back this week. Bijan Robinson up against Houston. You can't pass against Houston, right? It's the exact opposite of Tennessee. No. You run the ball against Houston. All right, you generate yards by pushing the ball through the center of their gaping hole in the middle of their defense, this gigantic hole. You just shove it right in, and it works every time. It goes deeper than you think that it will on most of the rushing attempts, right? So I'm very excited to shove Bijan into my lineups and watch him just shoot himself through a hole over and over and over and over and over again. I love Bijan this week. Breece Hall is another guy that I love. So, with the pricing, obviously Breece Hall is more attractive, but do you hate paying up for Bijan this week, or are you on board with that?
No, I mean, you know me, I'm a Falcons fan. I live here in Atlanta. I will definitely always pay up for Bijan Robinson. I mean, we're talking about full PPR too. With Jalen Petrie now coming back for the Texans last week, going to get fully ramped up this week. They're not going to be able to pass the ball at all. Desmond Ridder is going to struggle. The only escape is going to be Bijan Robinson out of the backfield, either going in between the gaps repeatedly or coming out of the backfield and catching some passes.
You heard it straight out of Jason's mouth. He loves paying for Bijan to go through that gigantic gaping hole in the middle of the field. So let's go ahead and let's build our first lineup. Jason, are you ready to rock and roll?
I guess so, man. I think that this lineup, by the way, will be fantastic.
All right. So, Jason, we're going to go ahead and start out with the quarterback position. There are a few quarterbacks that I like. You did mention Anthony Richardson, so I'd be more than happy to go that route. We brought up some Joshua Dobbs, right? Some Joe Burrow potential. Let me get this marker off your face. By the way, there we go. We can see you again. You look beautiful. If you're missing out, if you're listening on the podcast, y'all need to make sure you tune in on Friday nights at 7 Eastern time, so you can see this beautiful face below me anytime that he comes on the show. Let's go ahead, though, and let's start out with the quarterback of your choice. Who do you want to build this first lineup around?
We'll save my budget quarterback maybe later. I think let's go for Anthony Richardson. Let's maybe have some fun here.
Anthony Richardson at $7K. In order to get Anthony Richardson to pay off, we're talking about 25 plus fantasy points. But as we dive into his game log, he's given us that once thus far in the season, and the only full game that he's actually played. Keep in mind, up against Jacksonville, he played up until the 2-minute warning, had them at like the 1 or 2 yard line, had an issue with his leg, ended up taking off the final couple plays. Gardner Minshew couldn't get in the end zone, but I bet you Anthony Richardson would have, which would have put him above 25 points. So in 2 of the 3 games, which he also left the second one in the middle of the game as he got hurt, he's given us that salary. So like I said, it's still okay to play Anthony Richardson at this point. I'm perfectly fine with that. Let's go ahead and throw him into our lineup. And then you brought up Derrick Henry, who's expensive. I don't think there's a way that we can get in Derrick Henry and Bijan, but we will play with that. We will tease that here in a second. Do we want to stack Anthony Richardson first with, one of the wide receivers? Do we want to pay down to Joshua Downs, who's been somewhat okay, but not really relevant for tournament plays? Or would we rather go Pittman? Joshua Downs is at 37, so I mean, honestly, he pays off almost every week he plays.
I'm not against Josh Downs at all, and I think that might be the way that we can fit in both Bijan and Derrick Henry, maybe, if that is the route we want to go. And I'm also not against throwing in Pittman. I mean, you mentioned the pass funnel, and Pittman is getting it all. Alec Pierce had one good catch, but isn't looking that great at all. Josh Downs is starting to get some targets, but they're not high-value targets. And I don't even want to try to pick whichever tight end scores the touchdown here. All three of them got involved last week. I'm excited for when Jelani Woods will return because that'll change that. But for now, it's like you said, Josh Downs or Pittman. I'll defer to you.
The good thing about Pittman, right? The bad thing is he's up at 6,400, which I don't think he's worth that price range. The good thing about Pittman is that he's surrounded by guys like Devonta Smith, who's getting a lot of hype this week. Chris Olave, who had a little bit of down week last week, but could still see decent ownership. Meanwhile, we see guys like Garrett Wilson up against Denver. We know that people like to target Denver. DeAndre Hopkins, has that name equity. Nico Collins, who I think we're going to talk about here a little bit, but people would love to play him. So I don't know how many people in the $6,500 range would opt to play Pittman over some of these other guys. So we're not going to see high ownership. I don't think we're going to see high ownership on Anthony Richardson either. So honestly, we could play chalk if we end up running these two guys out. Let's go ahead and let's stick Pittman in our lineup just to see how it feels. We're going to stick it in. We're going to see how it feels. We're just going to kind of roll it around, play with it a little bit, see if it, if it wets the whistle, essentially, if it gets us there. And then we'll go back and we'll change it up if it doesn't. So we got Anthony Richardson, Michael Pittman. We're going to go ahead and go to our defense just to get a placeholder in. I'm not stuck on the Chiefs or anything like that. I'm just going to throw them in there so that we know what we're playing with the salary, right? We just know. We know. Now, when it comes to running it back, let's just say that we go with Derrick Henry and Bijan. We're literally playing at the bottom of the barrel with 4,500 left for every single one of our plays. Now, tight end, we end up going with the bottom level tight end, such as, Dalton Schultz. We're talking about moving that up to 4,900. That's a little bit more feasible where we can make a lineup work. Mm-hmm. Jason, how do you feel about the look to this lineup? We don't have to say that we're going with Dalton Schultz, but just to get a feel for the price that we have left at 4,900, the tight end that we have to go with at 3,400. How you feel?
I think we can find some magic here. Maybe go ahead and tip our hand on some of the values we'll be talking about later. But if you don't want to do that, we could find a cheaper option and maybe not go with Bijan. I'm not the biggest fan of Dalton Schultz this week, mostly because Richie Grant is pretty good against those tight ends, and Jesse Bates has been playing well as well, and the linebackers are fairly athletic down in Atlanta. So, but there's probably some value there. He'll at least get the targets, right? So let's keep playing and see what happens. I mean, are you okay tipping our hand on some of the values later?
I don't want to give away all of our sleepers, but I guess we can give away a couple,
let's
I guess.
Let's take out Bijan and, maybe save some fun for later then, or take out Derrick Henry too.
I'm cool with leaving it how it is. This is up to you. We are building the first lineup. It's all under your guidance, my friend.
Under my guidance. All right. Okay. Well, I'll trust you on Schultz here, I think, just because we'll get that skinny stack there with him and Bijan. Go ahead and just get ourselves into that same game. Although I do think there is a value there. So maybe, and as we've talked about plenty times on my Wake and Take, maybe we can make the skinny stack Tank Dell instead of Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, we could absolutely go that route. Let's go ahead and go with Tank Dell. Plug him into this lineup. And by the way, we don't have to go a skinny stack in this game. This could be a low-scoring game when it's all said and done. Just because Atlanta's defense is majorly improved, although they haven't had to touch matchups. Yeah. Meanwhile, Houston is going to prevent a lot of passing. So we're going to see a lot of clock wound down under Arthur Smith's, guidance of just running the ball over and over and over again. So we don't have to double up and get a touch in this game. But if we do decide to go that route, I don't hate Tank Dell. I think that he's a better pick than Nico Collins. I think that he's a sneaky play to kind of rebound from last week. And we've seen issues with the Atlanta Falcons defending that deep ball, right? There are certain players that have been able to get behind the Atlanta Falcons at the wide receiver position. And those are the ones that are actually working, although they're doing a good job of shutting down the position overall.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got Anthony Richardson, we got Derrick Henry, we got Bijan Robinson, Michael Pittman, Tank Dell, and the Chiefs defense. Let's go ahead and let's find a tight end that we feel comfortable with, right? Because we are going to have to pay down. It's not as promising as it was last week where we were looking at, certain guys that it was like a plethora of tight ends that were all in that 3 to 4K range that I loved. This week, it's not necessarily the same, but Zach Ertz presents a very interesting proposition at his price at 3,500. He's given us 2 weeks of over 11 points in fantasy. He's seen at least 8 targets, 3 of the 4 games that he's played thus far in the season. He's seen 6 receptions in 3 of the 4 games that we've seen thus far this season. Although he's not producing touchdowns, this could be the week that he gets in, especially if we assume that the Arizona and Bengals game is higher scoring.
Yeah.
So, where do you think we should go with tight end?
I was going to suggest Chigo Okonkwo, given Treylon Burks should be out. We're already kind of heavily invested in this game. He's pretty cheap, athletic, could break one. I know it hasn't been a great season, but a player that we here at Player Profiler are fond of. And Zach Ertz, we could even maybe put into the flex because I think you broke it down great, and he's cheap. And then we could maybe get ourselves a decent wide receiver there to round it out.
All right, so I don't hate this, right? Because we could see Derrick Henry break off a bunch of big ones. We could see explosive plays all over this field, just explosions, just coming from Derrick Henry, just like, I'm not even going to go into that. We could just have a lot of big plays coming from Derrick Henry this week. We could have a lot of big plays coming from Anthony Richardson and Michael Pittman, which could result in multiple play scoring opportunities. However, if this gets into a game that's grinding, right, the over-under is 42.5. That doesn't give us a lot of scoring opportunities to be had for each player to go out there and get their opportunity. Now, the good thing about Chigo Okonkwo is that he's super cheap, but he kind of takes away to an extent like the Derrick Henry's price, right? Unless we're seeing the Titans score 4 touchdowns, Derrick Henry gets like 2, Chigo Okonkwo gets 1. You know, we're kind of eating away at ourselves in terms of a low scoring game, but we can go there, no doubt. We're going to do it for this one, and we're going to hop over to the wide receiver in the flex position in hopes that Vegas is wrong about the over/under total, or in hopes that all of the scoring opportunities go to those 2 guys over in the Titans, and that Anthony Richardson doesn't get stuffed up the middle by Jeffrey Simmons. All right, we are sitting here left with about $5K per guy. We have a flex position open. We've got a wide receiver position open. We have all of our games correlating just between 2, which essentially are 2 of the lower scoring games on the sheet. However, maybe there's a concentrated target share, which is likely the case in both the Indianapolis and the Tennessee line. Not so much the Houston and Atlanta line, but that's fine. That's fine.
Well,
it's okay.
Zig when people zag, right?
Yeah, I'm down. So let's go ahead and let's hop down to the 5K range, and let's start up at 5,500 because we can always pay down. We're looking at like some Zay Flowers, some Isaiah Pacheco's up at 5,700. Zay Flowers, we've got Mark Andrews on a double tight end set down at 5,500 this week.
Yeah.
Breece Hall, who we talked about, who I absolutely love, could play in that flex position at 5,400. That's going to leave us with about about 4,400 or so left over for the final wide receiver position, which isn't terrible. We've got Tutu Atwell. You don't hate the Breece Hall?
No, I don't hate that at all. I think that would be fun because, like you kind of hinted at, it being a low-scoring game, we're going to have to try to take these last few slots and really bet on a ceiling game from someone. Like, we've got to blow the top off with one of our last few spots. And so I think Breece Hall is a great way to do that against the Denver defense that is giving up so many points. And when Robert Saleh comes out and says Breece Hall's snap share is gone, he will be he will get the full load tonight.
He's getting the full load. You're damn right he is. I'm excited for that. No, I absolutely do love that take. Obviously, Breece Hall is one of my guys this week that I love in the majority of my lineups. And honestly, there's no way that anybody's playing the rest of the lineup that we've ran out there thus far. So I love some Breece Hall. Now, before we hop over to the last wide receiver position, let's check out some of these defenses. Maybe we can make some money. Maybe we need to move off some money. But it's interesting because, like the Dolphins, for example, $300 more, and they're up against the Giants. Giants can be forced to drop back. They're going to be forced to throw. The Dolphins really haven't generated that many turnovers, but typically they're allowing some high-scoring games, especially last week up against the Bills. But it could happen where we could see some turnovers if we pay up for that. Meanwhile, we have, at this lower price point, the Jets up against Denver. Right, the Jets are generating 7.8 points per game. Denver's been known to make some mistakes, but they're still scoring at a pretty high clip. That's an interesting one for me. And then if you want to pay down to the Steelers, I think the Steelers are extremely interesting because the majority of their offensive line is completely crushed for the Baltimore Ravens. It could allow plenty of opportunities for sack strip fumbles and
Yeah.
same sort of script that we saw up against Cleveland, right? Where they had 6 sacks, right? They ended up having 2 defensive touchdowns because they forced 3 defensive fumble recoveries and 1 interception. They allowed 408 yards, which is a ton of yards allowed, but the reality was they were getting to the quarterbacks. That's what they're good at, right? Yep. They've had games of 4 sacks, 6 sacks, 3 sacks, and up against Houston, they didn't do shit. But I think that we still could see an opportunity for the Steelers to really go off up against the Ravens, lack thereof an offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I love myself some divisional games as we've attacked here with the Colts and the Texans. And TJ Watt is playing out of his mind right now. He wants another defensive player of the year. And what better way to do that than to really show up against Lamar Jackson?
Well, that frees up a ton of space. So we go that route. Now we're sitting at 5,300. And we have a guy over here in Tutu Atwell who's running the same sort of routes that we see from like a Deebo Samuel or Tyreek Hill type offense, right? Yeah. He's running these long looping routes that create plenty of yards after the catch, primarily a deeper target. The Eagles' defensive front is good. And it scares me a little bit playing Tutu Atwell in my lineups this week because I'm afraid that there won't be time to let the plays develop. Plus, we don't know what's going to happen with Cooper Kupp. We don't know what's going to happen with Van Jefferson. We don't know what's going to happen with Puka Nacua. Does Tutu Atwell see the bench? Does he see the same snapshot that we've seen from him in the past? Does he run the same routes? Do they even bring a running back on the field? It's just going to be all 5 wide receiver sets at this point. Like, what can we expect moving forward with this team? And so it scares me, but I do want to throw Tutu Atwell out there as a potential play up against a Philly defense that has been suspect at best. Mm-hmm. We have George Pickens up against a beat up Baltimore team like we talked about. And then Adam Thielen, who is getting disrespected more than anybody else, sitting there at 5,100. I mean, this dude is like in DFS land. Like, what is happening? This dude is doing nothing but producing. Yeah. He's just putting points up on the board, and nobody's even giving him like even a nod, right? I've played him 3 weeks in a row now just because he's been a monster.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's getting a ridiculous amount of catches. And I mean, you can't go wrong there in a full PPR format. That's going to give us a really nice floor. And I think that could be a good way to round out the squad. I'll go back to Tutu Atwell, though. I mean, I think that he could be the third option here. That's what I'm kind of expecting. I'm expecting Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp to still get his, and then Tutu Atwell to still be that deep threat. I think he can basically be the Brandon Cooks. Van Jefferson had a chance to do that the past 2 years, really, and he hasn't done it, right? And Tutu Atwell's been playing phenomenally. And with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp garnering so much respect, I could see him sneaking a couple into that end zone.
Yeah, I mean, it's there, right? But how many targets is he going to get? Like
6, 5?
No, there's no way he gets that many because Cooper Kupp is going to take 10, right? We're going to see Puka Nacua take 10. We're going to see Higbee take 7 or 8. I mean, like, how many times are we going to expect him to drop back and pass? Like, and completion rate. Like, Matthew Stafford completes 25 passes. There's only going to be 3 for Tutu Atwell.
Yeah.
If he completes 35 passes, okay, yeah, he can get there. And this is the game that we could see that happen, by the way, because, Philly's a little bit tougher to run against. Sure. Could Matthew Stafford complete 35 passes up against Philly? I'm not taking that away. I just think it's riskier going from that aspect.
Definitely.
Who's not risky at all is Marquise Brown, right? Marquise Brown is a dude that you could roll out there. He's right below Adam Thielen, also getting disrespected. I mean, he's seen 5 targets, 10 targets, 7 targets, 10 targets. Like, he's seen the targets necessary, and he's getting downfield for these targets. He's putting up touchdowns. Yeah. I mean, this is another dude that's 17.4 fantasy points, 17.1 fantasy points, 16.6 fantasy points over the past 3 weeks. I mean, both these guys, Adam Thielen and Marquise Brown, are just getting shit on. They're getting shit on.
Definitely. Good value there.
All right, so I'm going to let you pick. Who are we going with? Tutu Atwell, Adam Thielen, Marquise Brown.
I think you sold me on Marquise Brown. That was a fun. I got the butterflies when you were talking about it. It felt right. It felt good.
All right, it felt good. Let's go with it, man. Let's go with it. Let's shoot fireworks all over this slate with this. What?
Now I think we have enough money to do Ertz instead of Okonkwo.
Oh, yeah? You want to pay up for Ertz?
I think so, because then we could have, the Marquise Brown Ertz. Well, does that go against each other? Is that kind of purpose?
Not necessarily, but I think that we would want to play Joshua Dobbs, who has the rushing upside as well. Not as high as Anthony Richardson, but can still get you yards on the ground. But then we have two guys that can end up picking up, or would have to pick up, essentially, receiving touchdowns in order for this lineup to pay off in the contest that we're in. So
let's just leave it. Unless you want to. What do you think? I'll let you decide.
Let's go. No, your first pick, your first thought process was going to Okonkwo. Let's go with it. We're in. We're entering this lineup. Let's go.
Woo!
All right, we are in there. Oh, that was exhausted, man. I'm beat. It was a lot, dude. It was a lot. Are you ready? Are you ready to do it again?
Yeah, I am. It's a process.
It is a process. All right, let's get the 50K fair catch. We're going to draft our team. But before we draft our team, Jason, we need to back it off just for a second. We need to talk about some players that we want to avoid in our lineups. And I'm going to start out with mine real quick. And that's Joe Mixon. I don't want Joe Mixon anywhere close to my lineups. And he's coming in right now at the projected highest ownership on the slate. And I don't really know why. I mean, he's sitting at what, 6,200, right? Or 50. It's not sexy. It's not a sexy price, right? Like, I don't want him anywhere close to my lineups. He hasn't done anything this year. He's average. He averages a 1.7 breakaway run rate thus far in the season. He's only evaded 8 tackles. He has 3.41 yards created per touch, which is number 22nd in the league. And he's the 7th most expensive running back on the slate. I don't want anything to do with him. Go over there to PlayerProfiler.com, type in Joe Mixon, and just see how inefficient he has been on the season thus far. And yet everybody's running him out because it's Arizona. Guess what? Arizona, they've been somewhat terrible up against running back, but you better believe that they're not going to let Joe Mixon do anything to them because Joe Burrow hasn't been able to beat anybody. Yeah. I don't care what the situation is. I just cannot wrap my mind around why Joe Mixon is the most owned player on the slate at his price. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't get it either. If he had, at least strung together one good performance so far, I could maybe understand it. But I mean, even going into this year with T. Higgins not playing so well on the other side, it's like, why is Joe Mixon not performing? And you hinted at all the efficiency metrics that point to why he's just not that good anymore. And maybe the offensive line isn't good enough for him. Who knows? But I'm with you. I'm avoiding him too until he shows me something.
So you don't think he's been what's called?
Been fantastic.
Yes, he said it. Everybody take out your drink and take a sip of your cocktail, of your beer. He said the word fantastic. It's that time.
Woo!
All right. What do you feel like is a player that you want to stay away from this week?
I hate saying it. I'm a Michigan fan, but Nico Collins, I'm not going back to this week. First off, it's rare to have really good back-to-back performances, and also the hype could be there from the people playing, wanting to start Nico Collins now that he has truly established himself as the wide receiver 1 on this team, a truly elite option at the position. But unfortunately for him, the Falcons have been really good against number 1s. Calvin Ridley was 2 for 38 last week and scored a touchdown, but that touchdown was a broken play. It should not have happened. Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't really count because it's not like he's lining up outside and getting A.J. Terrell on him every single play. So then you go and look at Josh Reynolds, who had been playing really well all season, and the game that he wasn't against Atlanta, but he didn't even have a catch against the Falcons. Romeo Doubs, 2 for 30, 9 catches last week when he wasn't playing the Falcons. And then the Panthers, week 1, doesn't really count because it's the Panthers, but still Hayden Hurst, the tight end, was the leading receiver against the Falcons and only had 41 yards. No wide receiver had more than 2 receptions. I would rather pivot to Tank Dell that we put into our last lineup if we do want to chase this game. I'm not putting the money paying up for Nico Collins.
Yeah, I like that take. I think that it's a strong take. I really like Tank Dell this week. Like I said, you can beat the Falcons with receivers can get behind them. Traditionally, they've been pretty good against the primary wide receiver this far in the season. So let's build our second lineup. You ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Who do we want to start out this one with? I kind of want to go with the high scoring game, right? I don't want to
Yeah.
be left in the dust with a low scoring, shootout. And honestly, the way that the Rams are built, right? They can actually push Philadelphia this week. So it's not projected to be the highest scoring game on the slate. I believe it is up there to an extent. Yeah, it's at the 50-point threshold. So it's up there. It's right above the Miami Giants game. But the spread isn't nearly as brutal as the Miami and Giants game. Like, we don't want to see a situation where we're watching Robbie Chosen Anderson, catch a touchdown pass from Mike White in the fourth quarter because the Dolphins are so far ahead. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still great. They still put up those points, but we don't really know how the Dolphins are going to go off when they do go off. So I kind of want to play Jalen Hurts right now. And I kind of want to make it an expensive stack and go complete opposite build for what we did last time.
I'm not against it. I think that it's always fun to build a lineup around Jalen Hurts. I'm also not opposed if you want to attack this game on the Matthew Stafford side, really bet on the return of Cooper Kupp. I bet there's not a lot of people out there doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you could also go with Puka Nacua, who people could be projecting that Kupp is going to take away targets from.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go with Jalen Hurts. So let's just see what kind of, build we can come up with, right? Let's throw in AJ Brown, and just for the hell of it, let's throw in Devonta Smith. You know what? We should save this lineup for our sleeper one, to be honest. Just because we're playing with such little money. Maybe we should just save this lineup.
We can, yeah. We could save this. We could save this expensive Eagles lineup. Or, we could also maybe take out AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, maybe, and do the Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua thing. But that's kind of expensive.
Let's do this with our sleepers.
Okay.
You into this? You ready to make it happen?
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead. Give me one of your sleepers right now.
Yeah, I'll start with Calvin Austin. I'll start with Calvin Austin here. I'll go with betting on a guy that's really cheap, $3,500, that has been getting the targets. He's averaging 5.25 targets a game right now, has 98th percentile speed. The Steelers I'm expecting to have to play behind. Deontay Johnson's not playing. Pat Freiermuth's not playing. George Pickens isn't playing that well right now, and so I think Calvin Austin could be a really fun bullet to sneak in there if you want. I've got some other ones too if you maybe don't want to do the wide receiver position. But
who else you got?
You said I don't want Calvin Austin.
No, I'm just curious because you said you had some other guys. Who else you got?
Yeah. Let's say Hayden Hurst. I'll go with Hayden Hurst here. Right now, the Lions are giving up the third most points to tight ends. He had 7 targets in week 1. Hasn't done anything much since. But like I said, the Lions are giving up a lot of points to the position. And so I think that he could get back on track this week. Maybe playing catch up, lots of garbage time, end of game, little throws to Hayden Hurst, maybe.
I'll take that. Go ahead and get Hayden Hurst into our lineup. We are good to go.
3,100.